In this video, we're going to be customizing our laser. To navigate our drawing here, we can right click, hold down the right click, and drag the mouse around, and it's going to move. Okay. Then our middle wheel, we can zoom in and out by scrolling the wheel. I can also pan it to the side by holding the middle button. My middle button isn't working right now. Don't know why. I'll carry later. So we have, let's see, what do we got here? We got a few options we can do. So right now it's set up for 12-inch by 24-inch cut area. That's with the rails, the rail lengths here. So we have inside this laser, this rail right here. So it goes from over here to over here, right? And then this little green carriage runs along this rail. Okay? It uses metal bearings, really solid, really smooth. Now this bearing right here, this carriage, if I click on this, it says it's 45.4 millimeters long, right? My current X rail right now, if I click on the X rail, is 700 millimeters. So with a 45 millimeter carriage on a 700 millimeter rail, that means I'm getting 655 millimeters of travel, right? So I get the carriage, well, I get the rail length minus the carriage length worth of travel. So let's decide how big of a cut area I want, right? So let's say I want Glowforge size. I know those are popular lasers. So if I want the same size as that, the Glowforges are like 11 inches by 19.5 or so inches. Don't exactly remember. But we're going to aim for 12 by 20, right? A little bit bigger. So I'm going to bring my calculator over here. And 25.4 is our factor. Everything in the drawing here and most of our parts, almost all of our parts, are in metric. So I do a lot of metric stuff here. If you're comfortable with metric, then you probably don't need to convert. If you're more familiar with inches, then 25.4 is how you convert that. So our X rail, we want 24 inches of travel at least, right? Or 20 inches. We want 20 inches of travel. So 20 times 25.4 is 508. So we need 508 millimeters of travel. And we've got this 45 millimeter carriage on here. So 508 plus 45.4. So this is how long of a rail we would need, 553 millimeters. So if I wanted to have that 20 inches, I would need at least 553 millimeters of travel, 553.4. But we always want to make sure we have a little bit more than that. So I'm going to go to the next step up at 600 millimeter. Okay, so 600 millimeters rail will give us that at least 20 of travel, right? So I type in 600. I'm going to hit enter, and it's going to start rebuilding the thing. You'll see it get a little bit skinnier here. There we go. Got a little smaller. I click on this rail. It is now 600 millimeters. Okay. I'm going to do the same thing on the y-axis. So the Y rail probably doesn't need to be changed. I think that's right. So 12 times 25.4 is 304.8 plus 45.4 is 350.2. 350 is close enough for this. We can go a little bit beyond the rail with the carriage, and we'll do that here. Like, as long as the bearings don't actually leave the rail, we're fine. And the bearings won't leave the rail if we give it a little extra. Okay? So that's how we set our size. We can also use different controllers. The tutorial I'm going to do will be based on the Nano, but if you want to use an ESP32 on the breadboard, it will also redesign this for you. All right. So this little bracket, I guess I can hide this window. Right click on it, hide that. There we go. So this little bracket in here is now made for an ESP32 on a breadboard. I'm going to go back to the Nano. All right. And then we have, let's see, we have a radiator, inner fans, outer fans. Chances are we won't need outer fans for the smaller builds. If you're doing a really big build, you can use outer fans, right? 4 fans, 4 hoses. We have radiator on the side if you have a lower power laser, like a 40 to 50 watt, which is a very powerful size, right? Like you can do a lot with a 40 or 50 watt. You can add a radiator on the side here, so it does self cooling. It doesn't work perfectly. Like if it's a really hot summer day, this radiator might not be enough. So keep that in mind. You might have to do external cooling, which is it's easy to do external cooling. But if you just want a self-contained system for cooling, the radiator works great. Okay. And then we have rear power, right? I can deselect this, which will get rid of the rear power input. Reselect it. Now, in a little bit here, I'm going to be asking people what other options they want on this thing. One thing they want is power on the side, right? And then fans on this side. That way they can push it flat against the wall. So if I come up from the top view, instead of having hoses come out the back, it's just flat against the wall, takes up less desk space, and the hoses just come out the side, or one hose, two hose, whatever you have, and the power comes over here. So there's those options, right? And then laser diameter. So keep this in mind when you're choosing laser diameter. Right now, we have a 600 millimeter X rail. So the laser, the first mirror, if you look inside the machine, I guess I'll hide some of these parts. Okay. So there's going to be a clamp here, and there's going to be a clamp on top of this thing too. Okay, on this rail. These rails are made to slide in and out to hold the laser correctly. They're not necessarily designed to block the fan. They're just there to remind you to count them, right? When you make your parts list, make sure you add these rails as part of your parts list. Okay, so we have the laser going across this rail and this rail and this little mount here, right? This mounts the tube to it. The mirror that it hits, the first mirror that it hits will be on this rail. So that means we have about this point right here to about this point back here of distance to mount a tube, okay? Which is 880 millimeters. So I can fit a 50 watt tube. 50-watt tube is 800 millimeters. 800 to 850. I guess they vary. A 40-watt tube is about 700 millimeters. So I could actually go smaller size and fit a 40-watt tube. But if you're looking to do like an 80-watt tube or 100-watt tube, you're going to need a lot more space than that. You're also going to need a bigger diameter. So I've got a 1200 millimeter 60-watt tube downstairs. I'm at a makerspace right now, Sunoco makerspace in Everett, but that diameter is 60. No, it's 55. I believe it's 55. So I can type in 55, and it's going to make that just a little bit bigger. I don't know if you saw that. I can change that again. I can go to 50, and it shrinks a little. I can go, I don't know, 100 for a big old tube. It's going to get a lot bigger, right? We're also starting to run into the cut area here. I probably wouldn't suggest anything bigger than a 60 millimeter tube. Maybe an 80 millimeter tube. I don't know. But it starts to get kind of large. We'll do a right view. And it starts to get in the way of things, right? So now a rail is sort of colliding. I guess our rail scoots forward. Anyways, your 40 to 50 watt tube, chances are it's 50 millimeters. You can look it up when you're sourcing tubes, the diameter of the tube itself. But we got this little piece to change it also. Okay, so that's how you configure your machine here. So if you want Glowforge size, you probably want 350 by 600. If you want like a 12 by 24, you want 350 by 700, right? If you just want a huge machine, which I know some of you do, and you want to order like the big sheet straight from Delby's, throw it in your machine and put it on there. Delby'sPlastics.com is where I get most of my acrylic. You want a 12 or a 24-inch by 48-inch capability. Then you want 700 on your Y and 1300 on your X. Which you're going to have a hard time finding a 1300 millimeter rail. You'll probably have to put two rails together and line them up, which isn't hard. Okay, with this size, I probably want some outer fans too. There we go. All right. And I might go for a bigger tube. I might go for one of the 80 watt tubes. I think that's 700 or 70 millimeters. The tube size. And there we go. But I think once I start building this and following along in the tutorial, I'll probably do 700 rail by 350. No, I'll do 400. I'll do a 400 rail. I got plenty of 400 rail laying around. I'll do that. All right. So this is going to be a long process. There's a lot to it. If you're familiar with like building things out of frames or wiring or anything, feel free to skip. Like I'm going to go into a lot of detail for people that don't know much. If you do know much, then just skip on ahead. Thanks for watching.